The forgotten cemetery in a quiet town, surrounded by dense forests, lay a cemetery that everyone had forgotten. Hidden deep within the trees, the old graveyard was overgrown with weeds, its tombstones cracked and covered in moss. Most townspeople didn't even know it existed, and those who did knew better than to speak of it. The cemetery had a dark reputation, and locals believed it was cursed. People whispered of strange occurrences and shadows that moved on their own. One autumn, AJ, an adventurous young man, decided to explore the forgotten cemetery. He'd heard rumors about it and wanted to see if there was any truth to the tales. Armed with a flashlight and his camera, he set off one evening, determined to document whatever he found. As AJ walked through the forest, the trees grew thicker, and the light from the setting sun barely penetrated the canopy. A cold wind picked up, and an eerie silence settled around him. Finally, he spotted the broken iron gate of the cemetery, half buried in leaves and vines. Pushing it open with a creak, he stepped inside. The air grew colder, and he felt an uneasy chill creep over him. The graveyard was filled with old tombstones, some leaning at odd angles, others completely fallen over. A large stone cross stood at the center, marking the grave of a woman named Amara, who had died young. The epitaph was faded, but he could just make out the words "Eternal Rest for the Broken Soul." As he walked around, snapping photos, AJ felt the sensation of being watched. He brushed it off as his imagination, but soon he noticed something peculiar. In every photo he took, faint shadows seemed to linger near the graves, almost like figures standing by the tombstones. The shadows grew darker and clearer with each picture, though he could see no one around him. Trying to shake off his growing fear, AJ continued deeper into the cemetery. That's when he noticed a fresh grave, out of place among the older tombs. The soil was freshly turned, and there was no headstone, only a simple wooden marker with no name. Just as he bent down to inspect it, he heard a faint whisper. "Help! Me!" AJ froze, his heart pounding. He shone his flashlight around, but there was no one in sight. The voice grew louder, echoing around him. "Help! Please! Free us!" Terrified but compelled to stay, he moved closer to the fresh grave. As he touched the marker, a cold hand suddenly gripped his wrist. He gasped, stumbling backward, and saw a figure slowly rising from the ground. It was the ghostly form of a young woman, her face pale and eyes sunken, dressed in an old, tattered gown. "Please," she whispered, her voice hollow and filled with despair. "We are trapped. Lost. Forgotten." AJ tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. He could only stare as the woman continued, her face filled with sorrow. "This cemetery was cursed long ago. We are souls bound to this place, unable to move on. No one remembers us. No one comes to pray or set us free." AJ managed to ask, "What can I do?" The woman extended her hand, pointing toward the central cross in the cemetery. "The curse is sealed there. Remove the soil beneath it, and place a flower in our memory." Shaking, AJ approached the cross. He began digging with his hands, his fingers numb from the cold. After a few moments, he found a small metal box buried beneath it. Inside was a withered flower, old and shriveled, but still holding a faint trace of its original beauty. AJ removed the flower and replaced it with a fresh one he picked on his way to the cemetery. As soon as he did, a gentle breeze swept through the graveyard, and the air grew warmer. The ghostly woman looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her form growing fainter. "We are free now. At last." One by one, other shadowy figures began to emerge from the graves, their faces softening with relief and peace. They slowly faded into the night, leaving AJ alone in the silent cemetery. When he returned to town, he tried telling others about the forgotten cemetery and the spirits he had freed, but no one believed him. The cemetery soon vanished from the forest, as if it had never been there. But AJ knew the truth. He would never forget the forgotten cemetery, and every year, on the same autumn night, he would return to place a single flower in memory of the souls who had finally found peace. Would you dare to explore the forgotten cemetery, knowing its haunted history?